Daniel Clarke and his network of trusted associates seemed untouchable. For years they ran a 26 million empire hidden in plain sight, until one careless mistake shattered everything and exposed the dark world they thought no one could ever find. In the early months of 2015, the quiet town of Chelmsford in Essex became the unlikely birthplace of a criminal empire worth millions. Nestled among ordinary houses, a man who called himself Mr. Clarke lived what appeared to be an entirely respectable life. He dressed like a businessman, drove a modest car, and paid his taxes on time. But behind the calm exterior, Clarke was building something extraordinary, an empire so carefully crafted that for years it would pass as perfectly legitimate. Every part of his operation was designed to blend into the background, invisible to both neighbors and authorities. Clarke understood that the most successful criminals are the ones no one suspects. Instead of dealing in drugs or stolen goods directly, he focused on the one thing every criminal needed but few could manage on their own: cleaning dirty money. Using his background in finance, he started creating shell companies that existed only on paper. These businesses looked real. They had websites, bank accounts, invoices, and even fake employees. To anyone checking, they seemed like small but thriving enterprises involved in importing electronics, exporting machinery, or selling luxury watches. Each company was connected to the next through an intricate web of transactions, making it almost impossible to trace where the money truly came from. What made Clarke's empire different was how ordinary it all looked. His businesses were not flashy or loud. They operated from rented offices with ordinary signage and used common accounting software. Clarke's associates, recruited from various parts of the country, were trained to play their roles with precision. Some posed as company directors, others handled cash deposits, and a few managed fake supply chains that appeared to stretch across Europe. Every invoice, every transfer, every phone call was logged to create a sense of authenticity. By the end of the first year, Clarke's network had already moved millions of pounds through what seemed like legitimate trade. He was cautious, never leaving a digital trail that linked him directly to the companies. Payments went through multiple accounts before reaching their final destinations. The money flowed through countries like Spain, Cyprus, and the Netherlands, bouncing across borders faster than investigators could track. Clarke's genius lay in simplicity. His crimes were hidden in plain sight. If anyone ever looked closely, the paperwork would appear perfect. Everything matched: shipment records, customs declarations, and financial audits. There was nothing that screamed corruption. It was as if the system itself had accepted the lie as truth. Over the years, Clarke grew more confident. He purchased a luxury watch business in London, using it as a front to launder high-value cash. He even sponsored small local events to appear respectable, donating modest sums to community projects. To outsiders, he was a model citizen. No one questioned how he managed to maintain such steady income, or why his companies seemed to thrive even when markets dipped. His name was never on any official documents, and his closest associates never mentioned him publicly. Everything was built on silence, discipline, and precision. By 2019, Clarke's network had become a silent powerhouse. Millions had been cleaned, reinvested, and recycled back into the UK economy. To law enforcement, the companies were small players in international trade. To the underworld, they were gateways for moving money safely and efficiently. Clarke had done what few managed. He turned crime into a business and disguised it as success. For nearly 5 years, the operation ran without a single issue, not one slip, not one loose end. But perfection has limits. It takes only one small mistake to bring down even the most carefully constructed empire. And Clarke's downfall would begin not with a major raid or betrayal, but with something so trivial that no one could have predicted it. It started with something so small that it almost went unnoticed: a white delivery van parked awkwardly outside a warehouse in Milton Keynes. The vehicle looked ordinary, dusty, and unremarkable, but its registration number told a different story. A local parking warden ran the license plate through the database after spotting it parked illegally for several days. The result was routine but unusual: The van's insurance had expired 3 months earlier, and its registration details didn't match the company name displayed on the side. Normally the matter would have ended with a fine or an impound order, but when the warden called to notify the listed owner, the phone number connected to a dead line. That tiny inconsistency triggered a chain of events that would unravel a £26 million empire. The van was towed to an impound yard and tagged for inspection. When a worker opened the rear doors to confirm the cargo, he noticed that the boxes stacked inside didn't make sense. Each was neatly sealed and labeled printer paper, office supply shipment. Yet when he tried to lift one, it barely moved. Curious, he opened the top of a single box, slicing through the tape with a utility knife. Inside, instead of reams of A4 paper, were bundles of tightly wrapped cash, stacked like bricks and bound with rubber bands. The total weight of the load made sense now. Hundreds of thousands of pounds hidden beneath a false label. Police were called immediately. Within hours, officers surrounded the impound lot and sealed off the area. They photographed every box, counted every bundle, and catalogued the serial numbers. The van held nearly £400,000 in cash, most of it in small denominations, suggesting that it had come from street-level operations. The find was shocking not because of the amount, but because of how organized it was. The money was wrapped with precision, labeled with dates and codes, and arranged as if part of an accounting system. This wasn't a one-off crime. It was part of something far bigger. When detectives ran the vehicle identification number, they found that the van was registered under a logistics company based in Essex, one that appeared legitimate and had been trading for years. Its website advertised nationwide delivery services and listed real client reviews, but further checks revealed inconsistencies. The listed address was a virtual office, and the phone number redirected to an untraceable call forwarding service. Financial records showed large, regular transfers to foreign accounts in Spain and Cyprus. On paper, it looked like an international trading company, but in reality, it was just one piece of a much larger puzzle. Investigators searched the warehouse where the van had been parked. Inside, everything seemed in order. Shelves filled with packaging materials, pallets of boxes, and a few computers used for logistics tracking. Yet a closer look revealed layers of deception. Many boxes were empty, sealed only to give the illusion of busy operations. The computers contained fake shipping manifests, all referencing non-existent products. Every piece of data was designed to reinforce the illusion of legitimate business. The more detectives uncovered, the more bizarre the situation became. The logistics company had no actual clients, no real levellees, and no employees beyond a few names that couldn't be verified. It existed purely on paper, maintained to justify large sums of money moving through its accounts. What began as a minor parking issue now looked like a front for serious financial crime. Officers suspected money laundering, but the scale was unclear. Forensic accountants were brought in to trace the funds, and what they found stunned even seasoned investigators. The company was just one of many linked entities, all transferring money to one another in endless circles. The van, the warehouse, the fake deliveries, everything was part of a hidden network. The discovery made headlines internally among financial crime units, though the public knew nothing yet. Behind closed doors, teams began mapping connections, identifying directors, and following transactions that led far beyond the ordinary white van that shouldn't have been parked there had opened the first door into a criminal empire that had remained invisible for years. What appeared to be a simple clerical oversight, a forgotten insurance renewal, was the first crack in a wall built with precision and secrecy. No one knew it then, but that van marked the beginning of the end for Mr. Clarke and his carefully maintained illusion of legitimacy. The impounded van and its mysterious cargo were just the beginning. When investigators traced its registration back to the company that owned it, they found themselves staring into a maze of connections that didn't make sense. The logistics company, known as Braden Exports Limited, appeared entirely legitimate on the surface. It had registration records, bank accounts, and tax filings that seemed perfectly in order. But every piece of evidence the police pulled apart revealed another layer of deception. The company existed on paper, yet its operations were little more than fiction. Every document, every receipt, every signature pointed to a world carefully designed to look normal while hiding millions in criminal proceeds. Detectives began mapping out the network of associated businesses that Braden Exports was connected to. It didn't take long to find over a dozen other companies with similar names, all registered at different addresses across the country. Some shared directors, others had none at all. A few were registered to people who didn't seem to exist, names that led to empty houses, fake IDs and mailboxes rented under false identities. Every business had a purpose, one specialized in importing electronics, another in exporting machinery, and a third in dealing with luxury watches, but not one of them had ever shipped a real product. Behind the scenes, forensic accountants started combing through bank statements. They found millions moving in and out each week, transferred across borders into accounts in Spain, Cyprus, and the Netherlands. The pattern was deliberate, money moving in small, frequent amounts that never stayed in one place for long. It was a textbook example of layering, a common tactic used to disguise the origin of illicit funds. The process was brilliant in its simplicity. Deposit cash through one company, move it to another under the pretense of payment for goods, then funnel it through multiple foreign entities before bringing it back into the UK as clean income. By the time it re-entered the system, the money appeared to come from legitimate business activity. What puzzled investigators most was how flawlessly it all operated. The paperwork matched perfectly. Customs records, import licenses, and tax filings all appeared genuine. Even the handwriting on the documents was consistent, suggesting that a small, trusted group handled everything in-house. None of the companies triggered any financial red flags because the amounts, though large, were spread out and disguised as trade-related transfers. It was clear that whoever designed this system understood the weaknesses in the regulatory framework and had exploited them with surgical precision. As analysts dug deeper, they uncovered something even more unsettling. Many of the companies were interconnected through digital fingerprints, identical IP addresses, similar email structures, and matching invoice templates. It became evident that the entire network was being run by one central authority. This wasn't a random collection of fake firms, it was an organized empire of financial fraud. Investigators referred to it privately as the Ghost Network, because everything within it was invisible yet connected, existing only in data and paperwork. Undercover officers began visiting some of the listed addresses. Most were empty units or shared office spaces where dozens of small firms registered their names, but never actually operated. In one London address, the office door displayed 15 different company plaques, including Braden Exports. But inside there was only one desk and a computer. The receptionist had no idea who the directors were or when they last visited. Every lead seemed to vanish into thin air, replaced by another layer of misdirection. Yet, despite the perfection of the system, a sense of overconfidence began to emerge. The network had operated for years without interference, which made its architects careless in subtle ways. The pattern of transactions, though well disguised, revealed repetitive loops. Several payments followed the exact same routes across multiple companies, differing only by a few digits in reference numbers. To the trained eyes of forensic experts, that repetition was the first sign of human error creeping in. Each new discovery deepened the mystery and increased the urgency of the investigation. Law enforcement now understood they were not just dealing with financial fraud, but with a large-scale laundering operation, supporting organized crime across Europe. Drugs, weapons, and smuggled goods. Everything dirty eventually led back to this clean network of British businesses. It was a silent system that turned the proceeds of crime into polished profits, all hidden behind spreadsheets and signatures. The discovery of the Ghost Network changed the direction of the investigation entirely. The van in Milton Keynes was no longer just a random find. It was the visible tip of something vast, structured, and deeply rooted. The National Crime Agency formed a specialized task force to untangle it, aware that even one small mistake in their approach could alert the people behind it. What none of them realized yet was that the same perfection they admired in the system would soon betray its creators. In a matter of weeks, a single careless digital error would expose everything Mr. Clarke had worked to protect. The investigation into the ghost network had reached a critical point. For months, investigators from the National Crime Agency worked day and night, chasing transactions, reviewing invoices, and tracing company records across multiple countries. Yet despite their efforts, they couldn't find the single thread that connected everything to one person. The operation was too sophisticated, too well structured. Every lead led to another dead end. Every name to another false identity. It was as if the entire empire had been designed to stay hidden forever. That was until an ordinary accounting error exposed the truth behind it all. The breakthrough came when a digital forensics analyst named Rachel Hughes began examining electronic records taken from one of the seized computers at the Milton Keynes warehouse. Most of the files were encrypted or duplicated across multiple folders, but one set of invoices caught her attention. Two documents looked nearly identical, same date, same product description, and almost the same payment amount. The only difference was the company name at the top. One invoice belonged to Braden Exports Limited, the British firm already under scrutiny, and the other was from a supposedly unrelated company based in Cyprus, called Altheon Trading Co. Both invoices referred to the same shipment of industrial bearings, supposedly valued at. At first, the duplication seemed like a mistake by an inexperienced accountant, but when Hughes checked the metadata embedded in the files, she noticed something peculiar. Both invoices had been created using the same software version, on the same laptop, and within the same 2-minute time window. Even the registered username on the document properties was identical. This meant that both companies, though officially separate, were controlled by the same person. In the world of digital forensics, it was an unmistakable fingerprint. When investigators compared these files to other documents across the network, they found a pattern. Dozens of invoices, so codely generated by different companies in different countries, shared identical digital characteristics. Each had the same creation tool, identical formatting, and a consistent time zone, GMT POM1, the same as the UK. The illusion of independence between companies vanished instantly. It became clear that all of these separate entities were being managed from a single location in Britain. This one careless mistake, the duplication of a file using the same template, had torn a hole through the network's secrecy. Investigators could now link the offshore firms to the UK operations with solid, traceable digital evidence. Once they had this key, everything began to fall into place. Cross-referencing IP logs from email servers revealed that many of the company directors had accessed their international accounts from the same handful of internet connections in Essex and London. Those IP addresses were traced back to private residences and small rented offices, several of which were under surveillance for suspected money laundering. Forensic analysts continued digging into the digital trail left behind. Every small inconsistency, every reused document, and every shared email header became part of the growing evidence pile. They discovered that one computer had been used to create over 200 fake invoices for companies spread across Europe and Asia. Some documents even contained hidden file paths that referenced folders labeled Main Accounts and Clarke Project. The name Clarke had never appeared in any legal record of the businesses, but now it surfaced repeatedly, embedded deep within digital archives. It was the missing link investigators had been waiting for. Once this evidence was presented to the task force, the picture became clear. The entire network had been orchestrated by one central figure, Mr. Clarke. The fake companies, the false directors, the offshore transfers, all of it was part of his design. His attention to detail had protected him for years, but the same precision became his downfall when a single careless duplication revealed his hand. The discovery electrified the investigation team. After months of frustration, they finally had a traceable, provable connection between the fake companies and their mysterious leader. From that moment, the investigation accelerated. Financial profiles were built, emails were intercepted, and hidden assets began to surface. The mistake that should have been insignificant, A reused invoice template became the most valuable piece of evidence in the entire operation. What had started as a small digital oversight now threatened to collapse a criminal empire worth over £26 million. Clarke had built his world on perfection, believing no one could ever find him. But in the end, it wasn't betrayal, greed, or violence that exposed him. It was one silly, avoidable mistake buried in a spreadsheet. For months, the investigation into Clarke's network had moved slowly, like trying to untangle a web spun by an invisible hand. Every company connected to Braden Exports appeared legitimate, every transaction justified by detailed paperwork. Investigators knew the businesses were fake, but proving it required something concrete, a link that tied them all to one source. The task force had spent countless hours analyzing spreadsheets, tracing international transfers, and comparing invoices from different firms. Nothing stood out. Everything looked too perfect. Then, buried deep within a folder of archived financial documents, a small digital inconsistency changed everything. An analyst working late one evening noticed something odd about two invoices that were nearly identical. Both listed the same shipment date, the same invoice number format, and the same list of products. Precision bearings shipped from a warehouse in Essex to a buyer in Cyprus. The only difference was the company names. One belonged to Braden Exports Limited, the UK firm, while the other was issued under Altheon Trading Co., supposedly an independent business based overseas. At first glance, it looked like a clerical error, the kind that happens in any busy company, but when the analyst checked the file properties, the truth began to unfold. The metadata hidden inside both documents revealed they had been created on the same laptop, using the same version of accounting software, and within a 2-minute time difference. Even the registered username on the device was the same: Admin Clarke. This discovery might have meant nothing in isolation, but when compared with hundreds of other files seized from different company systems, the pattern became undeniable. Many invoices shared identical formatting, similar time zones, and the same digital fingerprints. These were supposed to be international businesses, operating independently, yet all of them were being managed from one location. The team now realized that Clarke, or someone close to him, had made a critical error. In his obsession with control, he had handled too many details himself. He had created and edited invoices for multiple fake companies using the same device, never considering that digital metadata could betray him. It was a tiny oversight, one invisible to the human eye, but clear to forensic software. That duplication, that one silly mistake, had pierced through years of deception. Once the analysts identified the pattern, the investigation accelerated. They began linking all the fake businesses together using metadata trails. IP logs from email servers revealed that the same few internet connections had been used to send communications for companies supposedly based in Spain, Cyprus, and the Netherlands. Those IP addresses all traced back to London and Essex, right in the heart of Clarke's territory. The illusion of distance and independence vanished instantly. With this new evidence, investigators reconstructed the entire structure of Clarke's empire. The British companies acted as anchors, funneling money into offshore accounts. The offshore firms then circulated funds through fake trade deals, before sending the money back into the UK as legitimate earnings. It was a brilliant system, but now it lay exposed. The same computer that had built the empire had also documented its own collapse. Digging deeper into the seized files, officers discovered hidden folders filled with encrypted spreadsheets and transaction logs. Some contained labels like projects and rotes, each listing coded references to different companies. A few even contained partial names that appeared to reference Clarke himself. The digital evidence was overwhelming. His meticulous organization, once his greatest strength, had become his undoing. When investigators presented their findings, the task force knew they finally had enough to move beyond suspicion. Clarke was no longer an invisible shadow in a corporate maze. He was a man caught by his own mistake. The duplicated invoice became the thread that tied his vast network together, a single flaw in an otherwise perfect design. What began as a late-night discovery by an analyst would soon lead to the exposure of millions in hidden assets, secret offshore accounts, and an empire that had survived untouched for nearly 5 years. Clarke had believed his system was untouchable, but the digital trail he left behind proved otherwise. It was the smallest oversight, the reuse of one document, that brought an empire crashing down. As investigators followed the trail left by the duplicated invoice, the illusion of separation between Clarke's companies began to collapse. The invisible lines connecting his network grew clearer with every discovery. Each new lead revealed another piece of the empire, another business that was never meant to exist. For years, Clarke had operated in silence, building a system so complex that it looked untouchable. But now, the cracks were showing. The facade of legitimacy he had spent so long perfecting was beginning to unravel under the weight of one tiny mistake. The National Crime Agency expanded its operation, assembling teams of financial analysts, digital forensics experts, and undercover officers. Their task was to map the empire's full structure. The findings were staggering. Clarke's network wasn't limited to a few fake trading firms. It stretched across Europe, linking shell companies, offshore accounts, and property investments worth millions. Funds moved through a series of international transfers that looked like normal business activity, but when examined closely, they followed repeating patterns. The same sums circulated between the same accounts, disguised under different company names. Each transaction made the money look cleaner, more legitimate, until no one could tell where it had truly come from. One of the first major breakthroughs came when investigators noticed several deposits made to a small property development firm in Montenegro. On paper, the company appeared to be building holiday apartments along the Adriatic coast, but satellite images showed nothing but empty land. The payments had come from multiple UK firms linked to Clarke's network. Further digging revealed that the so-called development company had been registered by a British citizen living in Spain, who turned out to be one of Clarke's longtime associates. The money trail that began in a warehouse in Milton Keynes had now crossed 3 countries and touched multiple continents. Meanwhile, surveillance teams monitored individuals connected to the network. One courier stood out, a man who regularly transported duffel bags in and out of small currency exchange offices in London and Birmingham. His movements were predictable and routine, suggesting he was part of the laundering chain. When police secretly lifted his fingerprints from a coffee cup, they matched a record from years earlier. The man had once been arrested for a minor drug offense, confirming what investigators had long suspected. Clarke's operation was not a harmless financial scheme, but part of a much larger criminal web involving narcotics and organized crime. Each discovery deepened the sense that the empire was beginning to crumble. Clarke's careful strategy depended on absolute secrecy, but the network was now riddled with vulnerabilities. The same overconfidence that had kept him safe for years was turning against him. He had used the same accountants, the same couriers, and the same false directors for too long. Every person connected to his system was a potential witness, and under pressure, loyalty rarely survived. Behind the scenes, investigators coordinated with authorities in Spain, Cyprus, and the Netherlands to seize digital records and freeze suspicious accounts. Within weeks, millions of pounds were locked down, halting the constant flow of laundered money. For the first time, Clarke's empire was bleeding. His once flawless chain of transactions was broken, and every link that failed led straight back to him. The investigation's growing success sent shockwaves through the underworld. Other criminals who had trusted Clarke's network to clean their money began to panic. Some fled the country, others tried to withdraw funds before the authorities could seize them. The chaos worked in the investigators' favor, exposing even more hidden connections. What had once been invisible was now collapsing in full view. For years, Clarke had operated with total confidence, believing his brilliance made him untouchable. But the truth was simple. His empire depended on human precision, and humans make mistakes. The duplicated invoice had opened the door, but greed, arrogance, and routine had done the rest. From the outside, the businesses still looked legitimate, but on the inside, panic had begun to spread. Every associate could feel it. The end was near. Before dawn on a cold March morning, unmarked police vehicles began to move quietly through the streets of Essex and London. The National Crime Agency, working alongside local police and financial investigators, had coordinated a massive operation. For months they had gathered enough intelligence to strike at multiple locations connected to Clarke's empire. Warrants were ready, teams were briefed, and surveillance units had confirmed the presence of key suspects. This was the day they would finally bring the operation to an end. Clarke's network had run unchecked for nearly 5 years, but the walls were closing in. At exactly 5:30 a.m., officers broke down the doors of 3 warehouses and 2 luxury homes. The raids happened simultaneously to prevent word from spreading. The first location, a warehouse in Essex, looked ordinary from the outside, just another industrial unit among dozens of others. Inside, however, investigators found an entire room filled with equipment for counting and packaging money. Machines hummed softly beside piles of cash stacked inside crates. Plastic-wrapped bundles were labeled with codes and dates, meticulously organized. Next to them, a set of ledgers detailed daily transfers written in shorthand symbols. It was clear this wasn't a simple business, it was the financial heart of a massive laundering system. The second warehouse, located on the outskirts of London, contained a fleet of vehicles registered to different companies within the network. Many were luxury cars, BMWs, Audis and Range Rovers, with falsified purchase documents linking them to fake import deals. In one corner, officers discovered hidden compartments inside the floor panels. When pried open, they revealed hundreds of thousands of pounds in cash, gold bars and uncut gemstones. Every item had been catalogued and stored like inventory in a legitimate business. Further proof of Clarke's meticulous organization. The most shocking discovery came at the third site, a high-security storage facility, registered under an alias, behind a locked metal door. Police uncovered a small office, equipped with computers, encrypted drives, and secure phones. On the main desk sat a single binder, filled with handwritten notes and coded records. Once deciphered, the pages revealed a log of over 26 million in cash movements over 2 years. The entries were written in a secret color-coded system, each color representing a company, a region, or a type of client. Investigators quickly noticed that the colors matched the logos used by Clarke's fake businesses. The evidence was undeniable. Every strand of the operation led to him. By mid-morning, news of the raids had reached Clarke's associates. Several attempted to flee, but police had already anticipated their moves. Border alerts were triggered, bank accounts frozen, and communication channels monitored. Within hours, 15 people were in custody. Some of them were mid-level managers who had handled money transfers and shipments. Others were accountants and drivers who had unknowingly participated in laundering activities. All of them were connected by one man, the elusive figure known only as Clarke. In the aftermath, investigators combed through the seized materials, piecing together the full picture of the empire's operations. Thousands of pages of documents, digital files, and coded messages were analyzed. What they uncovered revealed the staggering complexity of the network. Clarke had built a system that relied on trust, fear, and precision. But his empire, once untouchable, now stood exposed in the daylight. For those who had worked with him, disbelief turned to silence. The luxury cars, the fake businesses, the seemingly endless stream of money, all of it had vanished overnight. The warehouses that once symbolized success now stood as evidence of one of the largest financial crimes in recent British history. The media soon learned of the story, but the full details remained sealed as investigators prepared for the next stage, finding Clarke himself. The raids had struck a devastating blow, but the mastermind was still out there. He had disappeared just days before the operation began, leaving behind nothing but an empty house and a disconnected phone. Despite the victory, one question haunted every investigator involved. Where was Clarke? In the days following the raids, the empire that had once seemed untouchable began to crumble. Dozens of arrests had been made, millions in assets seized, yet the man behind it all was still missing. Mr. Clarke had vanished as if he had never existed. His luxury home was found empty, its rooms stripped of anything personal. Even the computers and phones he had used were gone, replaced by clean, untouched devices. For the first time in years, investigators realized they were chasing a ghost. A man who had built an empire out of lies and then disappeared into thin air. Interpol and Europol joined the hunt, sharing intelligence across borders. Clarke's name appeared on wanted lists under half a dozen aliases. Immigration data showed no record of him leaving the United Kingdom, but he had planned for this possibility long ago. Multiple passports were found during the raids, all genuine but under false identities. Clarke had spent years creating backup lives, each complete with documents, financial accounts, and property. It was as if he had always expected this day to come. While detectives scoured airports and ports, forensic teams continued analyzing the evidence seized during the operation. Among thousands of files, they found fragments of encrypted messages suggesting Clarke had planned an escape route through the English Channel. The messages referenced a final delivery and departure under cover of night, both written weeks before the raids. Investigators suspected he intended to flee to Spain by sea, using private vessels controlled by contacts he trusted. Still, there was no sign of movement. Days turned into weeks, and the case that had once promised closure began to stall. Then, by pure coincidence, a minor discovery changed everything. A security officer at a petrol station in Kent reviewed CCTV footage while investigating a case of fuel theft. In the background of the video, a man was seen refueling an old silver hatchback. He wore a baseball cap and kept his head low, but something about his posture caught the officer's attention. When the footage was enhanced and cross-checked against images of Clarke, the resemblance was undeniable. More tellingly, a faint tattoo of a compass on his wrist matched one visible in earlier surveillance photos from years before. Clarke had not escaped the country. He was hiding in plain sight. Investigators traced the number plate of the car and found it registered to a false identity tied to a small farmhouse outside Canterbury. When officers arrived in the area, they observed the property for days, watching as a man fitting Clarke's description came and went. He rarely left, and when he did, he avoided cameras and main roads. The farmhouse was remote, surrounded by fields and dense woodland, a perfect hiding place. It was clear he had been living there under an alias, likely supported by money hidden before the raids. At dawn, a tactical team surrounded the farmhouse. The operation was silent and swift. Clarke was taken by surprise, sitting at a kitchen table covered with maps, burner phones, and cash-filled envelopes. On one wall hung a large corkboard, with printed photographs of his former businesses and contacts, marked with red pins and notes. He had been trying to reconstruct his network, perhaps planning a way out or even a comeback, but the game was over. The arrest was made without resistance. Clarke, the man who had manipulated millions and outsmarted authorities for years, now sat in handcuffs, calm and expressionless. In his silence there was no anger or fear, only the cold acceptance of a man who understood that his empire had finally fallen. When investigators searched the property, they found detailed escape plans, including fake passports, forged maritime documents, and coded notes linking him to contacts in Spain. He had been days away from disappearing forever. The farmhouse raid marked the end of one of Britain's most extensive manhunts. The mastermind who had lived like a ghost was now visible to the world, and for the first time, his empire had truly lost its power. The courtroom was packed as the trial of Daniel Clarke began. After months of investigation and preparation, the Crown Prosecution Service presented a case so detailed that every corner of Clarke's empire was exposed. Journalists filled the press benches, eager to capture every revelation about the man who had controlled one of the largest underground money laundering operations in the UK. The charges were staggering: money laundering, fraud, tax evasion, forgery, and conspiracy to commit criminal enterprise, all amounting to over £26 million in illicit gains. Clarke sat quietly in the dock, dressed in a grey suit, showing little emotion as his empire's secrets unfolded in front of the nation. Over the course of the trial, prosecutors revealed a labyrinth of shell companies, offshore accounts, and coded transactions. Bank records showed how millions were funneled through small, unsuspecting businesses before being transferred abroad and converted into luxury assets. The evidence seized from his warehouses and farmhouse painted a picture of control and precision. Clarke had designed his empire to appear legitimate, right down to fabricated tax reports and fake supplier contracts. What stunned the court most was the discovery that several businesses unknowingly helped launder the money, believing they were part of legitimate trade agreements. The prosecution argued that Clarke's downfall had begun the moment he stopped trusting his own system. The single mistake that cost him a mismatched number on a warehouse invoice had started a chain reaction. It led investigators to the one person who accidentally betrayed him, and from there the entire operation unraveled. As witnesses took the stand, including former associates, drivers, and accountants, the truth became undeniable. One of Clarke's senior managers testified under protection, explaining how the empire operated like a corporation, with monthly meetings, bonuses, and coded messages to track performance. Each revelation shocked the public, who had never imagined such organized criminal sophistication could exist beneath legitimate business fronts. Forensic accountants demonstrated how Clarke's personal fortune had grown over the years. He had invested in property, art, vehicles, and cryptocurrency, disguising each purchase as a business expense. Experts traced money trails across Europe, revealing that Clarke's influence extended far beyond the UK. It became clear that he wasn't just laundering money for himself. He had been cleaning cash for other criminal networks, taking a commission from every transaction. The full scale of his reach was so vast that authorities admitted they might never recover all the hidden funds. After nearly 12 weeks of testimony, the defense attempted to portray Clarke as a businessman who had lost control of his companies. They argued that his employees had acted independently and that he had been unaware of the criminal activity taking place under his name, but the evidence told a different story. Clarke's fingerprints were on too many documents, his coded notes too specific, his handwriting too deliberate. The judge dismissed the defense's claims as implausible. When the verdict was read, the courtroom fell silent. Daniel Clarke was found guilty on all major charges. The judge called his crimes a calculated abuse of financial systems and sentenced him to 22 years in prison. Gasps filled the room as Clarke remained motionless, staring ahead, his face unreadable. Outside, reporters broadcast the news live, describing it as one of the most significant financial crime convictions in recent British history. In the weeks that followed, authorities seized the last of his assets and began compensating victims of the fraud. The warehouses were sold, the cars auctioned, and the properties reclaimed by the government. Yet even after everything, rumors persisted that Clarke had hidden millions somewhere offshore, a final secret he never revealed. The story of Daniel Clarke became a cautionary tale across the UK, a reminder that even the most carefully built criminal empire can collapse from one simple mistake. His name faded from headlines over time, but the consequences of his deception lingered in every company and community he had touched. The empire built on greed and control had been destroyed by its creator's arrogance, and in the end, one silly mistake had exposed it all.